If getting faster in Motorfest is your goal, the sooner you switch to manual, the better. Not because it will instantly make you faster, but because it's an investment in your skills as a racer. If you switch early, you will start to develop the habits of a manual player faster, and thus you will progress faster. By switching, you are unlocking more potential pace in your driving, and that's huge if you're willing to put the time in to take advantage of it. All right, let's go. Real quick before we get into it, if you're looking for any other guides that I may not have covered on the channel regarding Motorfest, please leave me a comment and let me know what types of things that you're looking to learn about the game, and I'll consider making videos on that. I really appreciate that. It's feedback that is sorely needed. All right, let's get into the why first, and then we can talk about how you make your switch. The first thing, and this is probably something that you already know, but the overall pace with manual is better. Now, I tested this head-to-head with the same car, same parts, same track. And I did this before on a previous video, but I felt like that was over a year ago and my driving maybe wasn't up to par. So I retested it using the F40 on Kaiusha Spirit, and the difference was basically exactly the same as in that video. It was a 1.5 second difference on a course that really isn't that long. Now, back in that video I made before, my claim was that it's really not a huge difference, and I still stand by that. Manual and automatic, particularly in Motorfest, are not a huge difference. In fact, you can race and win grand races in automatic, no problem, provided that you have all of the other skill sets in line and you're not making a ton of mistakes. But the reality is, manual offers things that automatic can't do, such as engine braking. This is actually really big because it allows you to brake way later into the corner and thus carrying more speed into it, and then you can be in the correct gear to accelerate out of it, and you don't have to wait for the automatic transmission to understand that you are now accelerating to then switch to the right gear. You see, the way the automatic transmission is programmed is it's all based on your speed and your button inputs. So if you're braking into a corner, it's going to start to downshift for you. But you can't downshift before braking. It just doesn't work like that. If you let off the gas, the car will just drive in the same gear that you're in, and technically you'll be engine braking, but it's not exactly the same thing. In a manual car, you can downshift multiple times to go from, let's say, 5th gear all the way down to 3rd gear in order to make that corner. And you can do that way later because you have the ability to control it. Now, is it going to make up a 5-second difference in one corner? No, it's going to be very slight, but over the course of an entire race, particularly a grand race, those tenths of a second actually add up. The next thing is controlling your gears. This is important in a variety of situations, but the most important ones that I can think of are while you're in the gutter, or while you're going over curbs or bumps, or any type of situation that would unsettle the car. For some reason in Motorfest, when you're in a higher gear, the car feels more settled. It's almost like the suspension reacts to the amount of power that you're giving to the drivetrain. It's weird, but it does work. If you go over a curb in 5th gear, the car reacts completely differently to when you go over it in 3rd gear. It's strange, but it's a thing. Now, in addition to that, while you're in a gutter, you can actually control the way the car reacts based on what gear you're in. For example, if you enter a gutter in 4th gear, you can downshift to 3rd gear, which then tightens up your steering angle, and it's almost instantaneous. So, for example, on this particular gutter on Kaiusha Spirit, generally I would enter it in 4th gear with the F40, and then as soon as I get into the gear and the car feels a little bit settled, I shift to 3rd in order to take the gutter and accelerate out of it. Now, the F40 is a little bit strange because it gutters better than a lot of cars, so you're going to notice some changes with that car, and it does differ from car to car. But the general rule of thumb is you enter the gutter in a slightly higher gear, which then settles the car, allows you to accelerate around it, and then you downshift to accelerate out of the corner. It's sort of a high-level technique, but it definitely saves you time, and it's a reason why you want to be in manual when you're racing in this game. Now, the next thing is slightly a myth, and I'm going to explain why, and that's the launch. You can actually do pretty good launch control in both automatic and manual. If you go back to my example where I tested the F40 on Kaiusha Spirit and we take a look at the start of that race, we have both cars accelerating at basically the same pace. If we pause it right here before the jump, you'll notice that they both get there right around the same time. I mean, we're talking tenths of a second difference, if anything. The key to your launch control is the vibration of your controller. The way to launch control is to put the car in 1st gear, hold the handbrake, and then pull the trigger slightly, and then keep pressing it until you feel the vibration change. It'll get more intense, and that more intense point in the rev range will actually indicate that the car is going to lose traction when you launch. So you want to launch the car just before that. So let off the throttle a little bit to drop the revs down, and you can feel the vibration change. That's the point at which you want to launch. Now, some cars you can just give full throttle right off the bat, but just to practice feeling that vibration, like I said, you can just take it out to free drive, put the car in first gear, hold the handbrake, and then rev the car up, and you will notice the difference. Now, if you're not playing with vibration or you don't have access to that in your controller, then you're at a significant disadvantage, and you're going to have to start to learn and remember where the rev range is for each car to launch it properly. But you basically want to launch every car like that. You rev it up a little bit until you feel that vibration, and then half throttle off the start. Once it grips up, full throttle. Now, in addition to those things I just mentioned, you're actually going to see a more efficient NOS usage. And this is because you're not going to be NOSing through gear changes. Let's say, for example, you come out of a turn in AGP and you want to keep up with the guys in front of you, and they're NOSing away from the turn, and you want to make sure you stay in slipstream. You're going to blast your NOS in order to get back with them. Now, in doing that, on an automatic transmission, you are NOSing through your gear shifts. Whereas in manual, you can just put the car in a higher gear and then use all of that NOS power without wasting it in between the shifts. Now, in AGP specifically, the cars shift really, really fast. So this is not as important in that example, but if you go into Street 2, for example, you're using the F40, which has a very slow shift time, you're going to be losing a lot of NOS trying to get to top speed and stay with people. And you won't have the ability to shift from third to fifth in order to get to that top speed quickly. In manual, you can shift up early. You don't have to sit in the gear the whole time. And because you know exactly when you are going to shift because you're in control of it, you won't be NOSing through those gear changes. So you're going to use a lot less NOS in manual than you would in automatic. And honestly, that makes up a huge portion of what the difference is between the two. All right, I think I've sold you enough on why you should switch and some of the benefits. Let's talk about how you switch. The first thing is obviously the settings. You're going to need to select sequential as your gearbox settings. So go to menu, go to the settings, go to control, and then change the gearbox to sequential. This is just one tap to go up, another tap to go back down. It's a very simple, easy thing. You don't have to put a clutch in or anything like that. Some of that stuff is active in other games, but not necessarily here with a controller. Now, obviously, practice is going to be your best friend. Let's talk about how you practice. Start with cars that have less gears. That's my suggestion. If you're new, you haven't switched to manual on any other game, I strongly recommend this. Start with the F40 with 5 gears. Start with some of the old muscle cars that only have 4 gears. Just start with cars with less gears so that you get used to shifting the car. If you've been driving on automatic this whole time, your brain and your muscle memory is not used to it. So you need to get used to shifting the car and listening to it. Now, to shift in Motorfest, use the right bumper and the left bumper. Right bumper goes up a shift, left bumper goes down a shift. Now you can remember that because your right trigger is your gas and your left trigger is your brake. So you want to hit the right bumper if you want to go faster and the left bumper to go slower. But if you would like to remap your buttons, you can absolutely do that. This game has full remapping. So go into your input remapping settings and you can change your buttons to, let's say, B and X, or if you're on PlayStation, it would be circle and square. That is a common shifting button layout for other games as well. So if you're used to some other game and you want to change it, go ahead and change it. You're just going to have to make sure that you remap the handbrake, because right now X or square is your handbrake. You'll probably need that to be like right bumper or left bumper. Now, in terms of practice, I know I said less gears, but that's just at first. Once you get an understanding that you're going to need to be shifting, I really recommend shifting more. More shifting is better. Drive around in free drive and literally just drive around in the city, shifting and taking corners, and then, you know, shifting all the way through the gears, and then engine braking, and then shifting again. Like, just practice it. The more time, the more shifts you have, the better. So with that said, literally any playlist race will be your friend, except for like those really straight highway routes. And make sure you're tracking your times. If you're not tracking your times, then you're really doing yourself a disservice. You need to understand when you're progressing, because that little bit of progression is going to give you a mental win, and that pushes you to get even faster. So make sure you track your times if you're going to be doing playlist races. You can also just jump into grand races. This is actually the best way to expose yourself in pressure situations. You've got other drivers, you got people crashing into you, you're going to be hitting walls, you're going to be doing all kinds of things that make you have to react to other things than shifting. So once you've got the general gist of manual transmission, then go into grand races and just see how you do, and just take mental notes of where you are in the field compared to where you're going to be in a month from now. And finally, summit events are really good for gauging your improvement, because you can actually run the summit events in automatic, because obviously when you're learning manual, you don't want to sacrifice your summit rewards. So make sure you're getting those by doing it on the thing that you are most comfortable on. But then once you have your runs and you've got your best times, go back and run it again on manual to see if you can get close. And if your times are pretty close between manual and automatic, you may want to just make the switch permanent for next week. Now, there are a few races that I do recommend for specific things of specific practicing. Kyusha Spirit is really good for a couple of things. One is gutters, but also the dirt start on Kyusha is kind of unique. There's not very many, if I can remember, any street races where you have a dirt start other than this. So because of this, it helps you practice your launch control. The car is particularly slippy, and you can actually control that with your throttle control at the beginning of the race. Do the same thing I told you at the beginning of this video. Rev the car up until you feel that vibration change, and then half throttle once the race starts. Try to get it to where your car doesn't slip at all. And if you want to know if your car is slipping, you can kind of feel it in the vibration, but I would recommend some sort of tire smoke vanity, because then you'll see when the tires slip, you'll see that vanity sort of pop up. Now, another race you can do is Legendary X Rivalry. This helps a lot with gutters. It is just gutter back to back to back to back. This really helps with gear control. It really helps with engine braking and just being able to stay in gutters. It's a very, very good race to practice, whether you're practicing manual or literally anything else. Legendary X Rivalry is one of the best races in the game to practice with. Now, as far as dirt routes go, I recommend Get Dirt on it. It's one of the only true rally courses in the game. It's really good for off-road practice, particularly with rally cars. With Rally Raid, it's a little different because Rally Raid tends to be more like bombing hills. This one is good for rally and basically anything off-road. Now, let me give you a few tips and tricks when it comes to learning manual. Number one, the sound is really important. It's probably the most important thing when it comes to trying to make manual like a second nature for you. You need to listen to the car and understand when the car is going to get to its red line and you need to shift before that. That's the gist of it. You don't want to have the car sitting at red line. Once it starts banging off the rev limiter, you're losing time, you're losing acceleration, and when you shift to the next gear, you're going to be bogged down a little bit. You want to basically continue the acceleration. If you hit red line, your car's not accelerating anymore, then when you shift to the next gear, it doesn't have that same momentum. So you want to keep the momentum by not hitting that red line. Now, I know sound is very important, but at first, I do recommend looking at the tachometer. If you look at your tach, that's okay. It's not the best thing because you want to keep your eyes on the road and you want to pay attention to what's coming up. But if you're looking at the tach, you'll make sure that your shifts are correct. In fact, as of today, I still look at the tach from time to time. I use both the sound to let me know when the car wants to shift, and then I glance at the tachometer to make sure that I'm shifting at the correct point. Now, are all of my shifts perfect? No, but I'm also not the best driver in the game, and I could use some practice as well. Now, once you feel comfortable with the shifting and you're sort of doing it with like half listening to the engine and half looking at the tachometer, then start to add on the more advanced techniques that are possible with manual, such as engine braking and gear control. Gear control is one of those ones that you can use pretty much anywhere in the course. If you're going over heavy bumps, you should be in a higher gear just to go over the bump, and you shift back down in order to accelerate away from it. Engine braking is great for late braking into corners. It's also good for speed control. Let's say you come to a corner that's sort of high speed, you're in the top gear and you're going really fast, but you know the car really can't take that at full throttle. You just keep your throttle pinned, you drop it one gear, and instantly your car will drop in speed and you might make that turn. This doesn't happen that often, but it's a technique that you can use in certain situations. Ultimately, guys, practicing and tracking your progression is going to be the most important. So like I said, I recommend just having the most shifts possible, meaning drive the cars more. Now, if you're already a manual player and you're watching this video just to support me, I really appreciate that. But if you have any tips that you feel like I forgot and maybe it helped you when you were learning manual, please put that in the comment section down below, because I think as a community, we should try our best to help each other rather than just try to beat each other. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this, send me a DM on Instagram or Discord. I read every single message that comes my way, and I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.